Okay, so let's talk about something for me that is becoming pretty appropriate in coaching on a day-to-day basis. So I'm seeing a lot more people wanting to almost what they call, in many terms, I understand this sentence, a hold off follow through. So they're trying to reduce, and I guess you could think about this as a simple terms, they're trying to reduce what they consider to be a flip through impact. Okay, that's what they're trying to get rid of. Now that essentially means, and in my term, I'm still not entirely sure what this means, but when people talk about a flip, this is what I think they mean, and it can mean one or two things in my world. They're either referring to something that happens like this through impact, where the club head essentially overtakes the body quite quickly, and the handle, in my world, stalls through impact and gets the club head bypassing them, and they lose what feels like control of the club head through impact. That's what I take from that scenario. It can also mean the player's also unloading it this way. That to me is a bit more of a scoop, but I also understand where that sentence can become a flip. But in both of those scenarios, for me, it is also understanding why that player does that, and I can understand the mindset of a player going, well, I need to get rid of that. And I would say for the large majority of players that I see, reducing those scenarios in one way or another will make you largely a better player. This video is based upon the conversation that can oppose that. Before you start trying to, in what many people talk about is holding through impact, I'm a bit wary of that sentence, but I understand the mechanics. So rather than seeing this type of delivery where the club is just essentially just bypassing the body being very, let's say, inactive and the club head being super active, they're talking about becoming a little more rotary through the shot. All positives, as you can imagine. But let's imagine for a scenario now where you're a player with little to no speed and you want to increase speed. Now the idea of allowing the club to not really release through the shot is going to be probably more detrimental to you as a player than anything else. And you're probably looking for speed. So you're probably going to be able to, in some degree, accelerate this golf club from one side of you to the other side of you by allowing that golf club to release through the, let's say, through the hitting area. Now that doesn't mean that you're not going to move your body as well, but if you look at one of the pound for pound longest players in the game of golf, Rory McIlroy, he certainly doesn't look like he's holding anything off. And he is, what, 5'9", and pound for pound one of the longest hitters in the game. Now to hold it off, I think he would reduce a lot of speed. So I think this sort of goes in line with any golfer, any good golfer. I am not stating at any point you should allow that body to stall and get the golf club to flip past you, but I am saying this hold off feel, when appropriate, is good for the player, but it can also be detrimental to their speed and their freedom to the shot. So I've been guilty, and I think most golf coaches can be guilty, of just putting you in a sort of look that looks good for the camera. Another benefit to allowing the golf club to freely go through the shot is if you're somebody that's typically talking or, let's say, experiencing flip ideas, you're probably worried about the left shot for a right-handed golfer. You're probably seeing a few more lefts than you should do. So the idea of holding it sounds pretty appropriate. But if you're missing left, okay, it could be very simple in understanding that the club face in the downswing is too strong for your rotational style through impact. Okay, the club face is just too strong. Club face down is too strong for your rotational style, and the club face is just shutting down on you. So in that scenario, it might be a pretty decent idea for you to feel like the club face is essentially more open in the downswing. Now, not crazy open, and again, this is relative to speed, but the idea of going up to the backswing and making sure that the club face doesn't get too close so that you, the player, and again, this post is literally for the player that probably doesn't have, let's say, huge speed and wants to feel a free release through the shot, or the player that feels appropriate for those players that have the speed. So if you're struggling on, let's say, an idea of flipping through the shot, understand that it's probably there to help you. You've probably got something going on in your game that is causing that problem. But very simply, don't always see it as a negative, especially if you have slower swing speed. Consider keeping it, but reorganizing it. Allowing a player to freely release through the shot will definitely allow the player to enjoy the game and find distances rather than rescinding distances. Players that flip through the shot typically have issues with the club face, and they're doing something in recovery. So the flip style golf swing is a cause and effect model. But if you're able to harness it for the players that don't have huge speed, it's not necessarily a bad thing if the face is open, because they can use their hands and arms through the shot. Certainly a bit more of a freer release, something that sees the hands and arms fully released through the shot, nice and soft follow through, versus an idea of almost trying to hold off the shot, especially if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of speed, isn't actually the way forward. Yes, the camera might say, well, that doesn't look like a flip, but you've also lost 20 yards and a bit more of a heel strike. So when appropriate, and only when appropriate, consider keeping a full release.